Welcome to Thrones and Scones. It's your weekday morning podcast where we talk Game of Thrones over breakfast. It's Tony Hans and Jeremy in with you today, hitting Season 1, Episode 10. We've made it to the end. Oh, and of course, Power. That's not the title of the season. That's the title of the scone.
Knowing what we know about the scone, calling it Power is pretty much a stretch at this point.
Well,
no one man should have all that power.
Nobody should have any of that power. We'll get
Straight
to the scone here.
Brick.
Of course. But two weeks for us. What was years ago back in the Showtime, guys, the end of the first season, first impressions. What'd you think?
I think it's again, like I mentioned at the last episode yesterday, I thought it was a good pace. I think you get a lot of story in this. I also think that obviously with the storyline, I think episode 9 is actually a stronger episode for a season in compared to this one. Although maybe a few parts to it, but I think it was enjoyable. I think we're going to get a little bit deeper, but a lot of setting up the future, like the wars and where people are putting power play is coming up. I mean, we kind of continue a couple themes that are really interesting from the book as well, just with regards to Joffrey, and then of course the Lannisters, where they're putting their armies. They talk about, I think this is where they talk about with retreating because they've kind of put themselves in a precarious situation, although that may be the next episode. I'm not quite sure remembering that now.
It's a little tough. There's lots happening here. Jeremy, MVP, thank you very much. You stalled flawlessly. I forgot to pull up the wiki. I've got it now.
I'm good at stalling flawlessly.
You nailed it, buddy.
Let's talk about bricks more and power.
For anyone that might not be familiar with the episode or who just needs a little refresher, it's been a while since you watched it. As of the wiki, here's the plot of Episode 10, Fire and Blood. As tragic news spreads across the Seven Kingdoms, Bran and Rickon share a prophetic dream. Not pathetic, although, hey, it could be. Catelyn interrogates Jaime about her son's fall, and Robb's destiny is forever changed. After a surprising decision by his father, Tyrion heads south to King's Landing. The decision was he's no longer Tywin, he's Tywina, but we'll get into that. Meanwhile, Arya must conceal herself under a new identity in an attempt to escape King's Landing, and Sansa is terrorized by Joffrey. At Castle Black, Jon is forced to choose between the Night's Watch and his family. Across the sea, Dany pays a terrible price to save Drogo, but finds new hope when her dragon eggs hatch and 3 dragons are born. I didn't actually want to get to that spoiler right now, but there we go.
There we go. Good summary wiki.
Yay, wiki!
An extensive wiki.
Yeah.
It's a big wrap up here, and I agree with you, Jeremy. I think that there are a couple moments that are very important to happen in this to really set off season 2 on an awesome foot, like where we don't have to necessarily open up episode 1 with a ton of exposition. They kind of drop some of that here and pick and choose their battles, as it were. Right. But in my head, and we've said this before, when I think of season 1, the last image in my head is Ned dying, and I think that would have been more powerful imagery for the very last point there.
Yeah, and that continues in this episode. The morning, Catelyn and Robb, and the fuel that drives like his decisions as well. I think you start to see that. But why don't we go ahead? And is it okay if we just go to good and bad, and then we'll come back to some things we come back to cover, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's all well and good. Let's start then in, as you were already touching on, Catelyn and Robb grieving for their loss of Ned. I never realized this before. Like, the casting must have been incredible, or just the acting by Michelle Fairley, I think is Catelyn Stark. There is this moment where she's comforting Robb, and Robb's like, "I'm gonna kill them all," and she's like, "We're gonna get your sisters back, and then we will kill them all." And the look on her face is so Lysa Arryn. Like, it looks so identical that I've never really pegged them as siblings as far as aesthetics go, but they nailed that scene, and I assume it had to be intentional. It was so good.
Yeah, I thought it was really good, and I also think her and Jaime's kind of like night conversation. When she comes up with that like just rock in the hand and bashes him across the head. I thought that was pretty badass. That was like one of my favorite parts, and just like you get that he's like, look, he's like, kill me, cool. He's like, you don't get what I'll do to you. And I think that's actually a tone that maybe a lot of people may miss. He realizes what he's capable of now, right? Like I don't know if he feels a little bit betrayed or lost being captured and not captured or not brought back by his family, because you can see what family means to him from prior episodes, what he's willing to do for his family, and how he very much values like his brothers and sisters. So, and I don't know if it's obvious that he's missing Cersei at this point, but I definitely feel like that's on his mind. I feel like he realizing, like, what if this is the end, and is this how he's going to be remembered in those things as well?
Yeah.
Pretty badass, though. I mean, like, I'm sorry, it's pretty awesome when a woman bashes you across the skull with a stone, and you're like, yeah, and I'll do it just above the ear as many times as possible. Come on.
He's holding on to this confidence. Go ahead, Hans.
No, I was just going to say, kind of like we said already, I was super surprised at how much happened in this episode. Like, it's I don't, when I think of the season, which you had mentioned too, Tony, I think of Ned dying, and I kind of just think, and then I think of Daenerys a bit, and then that's it. But this episode is jam-packed.
We all
But
think of Daenerys.
That's just every night before you go to bed.
that's pretty consistent, though.
Poster on the wall.
But yeah, jam-packed. Episode 10. I agree there, because this is and I thought that this happened either in the last episode or early in season 2. Again, where we're just so scrambled. We've done this before. My favorite part of the episode, the King in the North.
Awesome scene. Yeah, that's good. Not my favorite, but it's up there.
Yeah, and we said last episode, 2 episodes ago, where Robb is kind of becoming our golden boy, and this is that Ned Stark mentality where I love it so much because he's the only person around that's going to be in this Battle of Five Kings coming up next season who did not declare himself. It's the people around him, the people that trust him, that see what he's going for, that then prop him up as the king in the North and make him worthy of it.
Yeah, that's sweet. I like that a lot. I actually never thought about that because, like you're saying, everybody else pretty much proclaims themselves or thinks themselves a god or among men, basically, in some of the cases. So.
Even Ned, who I didn't want to do it, but at that point there where he was going to basically be regent over the realm until an heir was established, he kind of had that mentality of, he needs to do this. He needs to be on that chair so that other people aren't. So I think even Robb has the moral edge there where he is doing this for the right reasons.
Yep. I would agree, and I think he has his family again in mind, and you see that loyalty there. And I mean, as we talked about a little bit last time, I think he's underappreciated from a standpoint of just how intelligent he is from a war standpoint. Like he's pulled one over the Lannisters, who would arguably be the greatest warlords in this area, right? I mean, they have the largest army, they have the most money, and he's pulling this off and doing it well. He's upsetting the balance in that regard, which I think was cool, and it shows a lot of king-like characteristics. What did you think of the scene with Pycelle or Pycelle or Pycelle or
So
Postal?
This is the question mark, Maester Pycelle, the question mark on my good, bad, and juggly segment, because he's technically clothed, but it's so thin.
Right? It's so thin.
And that beautiful sunlight shining through, it just gives us a little nubbin at the bottom, something to dream about at night. What might be lying beyond Pycelle's robe. It's my least favorite part of the episode.
It was mine too.
Simply because they seem to do this whole thing where they imply that he's letting on because he's like, and then he crack, 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 bam, bam, bam. The second this woman leaves the room, he's like doing all these stretches, like jumping jacks almost at one point. And then as he's about to walk out of the room, he goes, and he like settles back into his like humdrum shuffle self, which I kind of get what they're going for, where it's like, okay, Pycelle's letting on, what he wants to. He's hiding more than people may know, but I don't really understand what this youthful thing is about, because he's not young. He wouldn't be that spry, and I don't see what hiding that gets him, because even down the line, when he is attacked and imprisoned by Tyrion, that doesn't come out. It's not like he uses that then to run away or something. So I don't get it.
Yeah, I was trying to remember that in the books that they comment in the sense of like that he's a like crafty or something like that, like how that played out in this part of that. But I didn't make that connection at all. And the other thing, I think it's like, why is he telling the prostitute all these things? Like, why is he telling about how it just seems it was a very odd scene. I don't know.
Jeremy, you must have never hired a prostitute, my friend.
I mean, it is there is the weekend.
Hans, did you have any main thoughts about Pycelle and his conversation with Roz?
That was my
Spanish.
That was my least favorite part of the episode too. That I had I wrote that down, and my same question: why? And because I just don't understand it. And do they ever really bring it back? That
I don't think so.
That he's this apparently spry old dude. I don't get it. And even within that scene itself, he's talking to the prostitute and then basically kind of forgets what he was talking about, and he's kind of he gets confused or long-winded on some tangent, and then she goes, "Oh, well, what were you even talking about?" And then he kind of acts confused again, but apparently he's not. Like, I don't get it. It makes no, like, at that point when it's just the two of them, why is he, if he's going to tell the story anyway, why is he pretending to be confused? And I don't know. The whole thing's weird. I don't get it.
Right, because you have that scene, which is long, and then the Cersei, and then the new lover Lancel part, which is amazingly short, right? Like,
amazingly short, yeah.
I mean,
the part two of our Good, Bad, and Jugglies. Hans, we have such similar notes on everything all the time. I wonder if you wrote down, Lancel is unsettlingly skinny.
Coming from a unsettling skinny man, I didn't write that down. I respect it.
I'm just saying.
Hans is like, that looks nice.
I'm just saying. I've seen Lancel naked now, and I've seen you in person. I mean, say naked, but I've seen you in person, and I think that you got a couple pounds on the guy. He's like a void, like a weird black hole of nothing, like just a tiny little twink.
Yeah,
tiny little twink.
Yeah, I respect it.
And they get into this a little bit later, like you kind of get that she's pining after Jaime, but I never really understand why Cersei and Lancel have this thing. Like, certainly she could entice him with something beyond sleeping with him.
It just makes her just super weird. I think this whole family obsession with only sleeping with the bloodline kind of thing, and I don't know. I think it actually fit her character quite well. It was just a weird scene in this show, in this episode, but I think it's better explained. So
and I almost don't think that we should have got it in this episode, because we just haven't gotten enough tension between Tywin and Tyrion yet. But I think they did set up the fact that there's that bad blood in the past and that they don't have a great relationship. So it's still a good scene where they're having this conversation out in this battle camp where Tywin essentially says, "You're right," like acknowledges Tyrion's intelligence and goes on to then send him to King's Landing to be a hand in his stead. There was a moment, and I think the scene was done great in the show. In the books, I remember a very specific quote that, and I don't know if Tyrion says it out loud, but it's at least in his head, where he's trying to understand it, and he basically comes to the realization where he looks at his father and goes like, "Oh, I'm all you've got." Like, it's less of this respect thing from Tywin and more of this is my last play. And I think that kind of sets up the things to come a little bit better, but I still thought the scene was awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was a good scene. The kind of like you're saying too, I don't remember this coming so quickly, because for some reason when I was thinking back on the season, I remember there being much more turmoil between Tywin and Tyrion, and they introduced it a bit, but it already seems like Tywin's kind of, backing Tyrion a bit, and I think with more context, like you're saying from the book, that would have made more sense to me. Given what we've been told about Tywin, he doesn't seem that bad of a dude yet, So
so what do you think? So we're keeping with the Lannister conversation. Let's King's Landing and now the conversation with Joffrey, and their relationship, or kind of antagonistic with Sansa. Obviously Sansa's just an emotional wreck, lost her father, and Joffrey just is such an ass. He's like, let's go look at his head mounted on a spike. And I think that was really cool and really well done in the sense that you see Sansa kind of, especially at the moment, or obviously with the hand there, or not the hand, sorry, Kingsguard there as well, and they're kind of watching the king, but they're giving him enough space so that when Sansa has that moment of clarity where she's like, that's it. I mean, my life has no more further value. And I'm sure she realizes by pushing him off that, she would die. And just that moment, and then just the wiping of the blood on the lip. I mean, it was so cold, but it was like perfect. So I thought that was one of my favorite parts of the show, because it's done so well. So
back in episode 7, we had touched on the fact that Sansa is really at her peak annoyingness right now, and Sansa's got a real back and forth as a character as things go on. Yeah. But this is where annoying Sansa dies. The kid that is Sansa Stark is absolutely dead as of that moment, precisely. And then we kind of get this broken Sansa who takes on a number of forms, some of which I really don't like, some of which I do. But for better or worse, at least we kind of lose that immature side of things. She knows what the world is, and it kills her to know it, but she goes ahead with it, kind of operating under that mindset.
I think they kind of turn Joffrey pretty quick, right? So, I mean, he was kind of a little dick through the whole first season, a bit here and there. You'd kind of get an idea that he's a brat, right? But he doesn't really turn into now he's just the worst, right? I mean, within the last couple episodes, he turns pretty quick to just being just a complete a-hole.
Yeah, no, I think you always get an idea though. I mean, especially from the book, you get this conniving, just arrogant, evil son of a bitch from the beginning, and that's what I think. Like the whole with him cutting, whatever the kid that ends up dying. I can't think of it. Like the
Micah.
Yeah. I mean, with him doing that from that, you get that he just has no care other than just literally being who he wants to be, and then he's king, right? And he realizes he's the soon-to-be king, and I think like now that he's on the throne, he's like, I will do and say whatever I want. And violence is very much his answer and his, I would say, his shield to protect him from questioning all those things that's going to be brought to him from a family standpoint. I mean, we have to remember, I think it hasn't been brought to his attention. I think it's what the next episode when they start bringing up his lineage, right? But I still think violence is always his answer to when things really get questioned. He's like, oh, let me just kill someone. Let me just outlash against something, and then I am king, and you can't question me. So
we've got a lot of very evil characters in the show. We've already lost one in Viserys. I think there are a lot of different mindsets represented. We have a whole hell of a lot of sociopaths, I think, on the good and bad spectrums. Lots of narcissists. I would argue that Joffrey is the one psychopath in this show, like the one true psychopath.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree.
He's got that serial killer vibe that you're like, oh, even if you weren't king, some weird shit would be happening with you like that we just don't want to deal with. Incest, kids, avoid it.
I think so far, the one psychopath. I think there is another psychopath. And coincidentally, Sansa also marries him.
Never mind. You're absolutely, disregard.
But let's go. I want to take it back to Tyrion real quick because Tony, you made a comment, I think, on one of the first episodes. It may have even been the inaugural episode.
Yes, you're right. I want to see Tyrion's penis. Are you happy?
No.
Did not know we were going that direction.
You had brought up that Tyrion's accent was just so terrible. And he just really didn't stick yet for you.
It was the first episode, yeah.
So I gave it the entire first season because I didn't really think about that until you brought it up. And then I was listening for it, right? And then I started noticing it. So then I watched. I was kind of had an ear out for it the whole time. And my God, I don't know if I can be in this podcast anymore. It is driving me insane. And even Jenna brought it up too. We're watching, and she goes, "Oh, he's not bad as a character. I like him, but I can't stand his accent. It doesn't sound like anyone else's accent in the show.
Something's just a little off. It must be like one vowel or something that's just slightly askew, but it just nags at the back of your head.
Yeah. It just seems so forced.
Yeah, in a show that is very British actor heavy,
Yeah.
I think it's easily noticeable.
It's forced, and the funny thing too is there's plenty of people in the show that barely put on an accent at all, and that's not even as noticeable as his terrible accent. So
It's true.
Yeah, so what about John? And with him finding out about the death and then running away, do you think that was a similar thing with family now? I mean, we've seen his dad hit a hard moment and then throw a little tantrum and run away from the king. Do you think they're trying to show a similar quality to John by that moment?
You know,
and then counter that with him obviously coming back, because that's when I saw that scene in similar. Now that I mean, the show compared to when you're reading it, it's just so different in the sense you get this visual representation. I would argue that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're showing a growth in the family, right? He's like, yeah, he's his father's son, but he has qualities that is just, so much more, that he gets the honor, but he also accepts friendship, and you're hearing my cat like crying in the background, which is super
beautiful,
annoying right now. Persian kitties, murder them all. Yeah, what did you think?
It's always been my assessment that that's kind of what they're going for with Jon Snow in that moment, where that's his final like change to accepting the Night's Watch as his brotherhood. Until, and I don't think this is season 7, it might be season 6. I don't want to, I mean, we're spoiling anyway, but like when Jon has that real big moment where he comes back from the dead and then does this whole like, my watch is ended thing. I think it just sets up that no, not necessarily. And, the watch changes a lot and does him dirty. But I think that this moment is more about him having the honor to save his friend's life, because he knows if he doesn't go back, they're deserters as well. So I don't necessarily think that he's all there. I think that's what they're going for, but they're kind of leaving it open. And in my head, with hindsight, I think that it's less about that and more just about him caring for the people around him.
I think that's interesting, because I'm always looking for that now in the show, looking to see how they do things when you don't have as much kind of detail and explanation in the books, where we lose a little bit here and there. So I'm always looking at that and the symbology of those things. So I don't know, that was still a cool scene. I mean, John's obviously is one of those characters that's very lovable in this season, and so you're starting to really get a feel for what he wants and the honor he believes in. I still think it's cool when he's talking to Mormont about, he's like, I need you, I want you, if you want to come. We're gonna go fight the real war, the war that actually matters.
Yeah.
yeah, I think I like the whole John at the wall arc right now. I think that actually leads me into my best moment of the show, which I think is probably a bit different. Originally, I thought it was going to be the Daenerys scene at the end with the dragons, and just because that sets up some cool stuff. But I think my favorite scene when I was watching this episode, the scene that got me just the most pumped, because I couldn't really remember season 2 that much and how much they actually went into it. But I loved when the whole Night's Watch is getting prepped to go across the wall, and it's like, and is it Gior? I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Mormont, like Gior Mormont, is just like at the lead, at the helm. It's so badass.
You hear that Survivor in the background. It's the eye of the time.
It's perfect. Yeah, I really loved that scene a lot.
Lighting the torches, you're like, yeah, let's burn something.
Like, oh, it is.
I agree, actually. I mean, now that I think about you get amped up in that scene where obviously it ends in a very cool, unexpected. I mean, it doesn't have the same effect when you've read the books and seen the dragons are gonna hatch. But I mean, that was cool. A little CG for me, I didn't think the CG was too bad looking, but it wasn't the greatest.
Are you talking about the dragons now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's cool.
Yeah, as far as the dragons are concerned, they look worse at some points beyond this. But so that's kind of, I mean, it's the final moment. Daenerys birthing the dragons changes so much, sets her from essentially what was going to be certain death to, okay, now, you got this real fighting chance. And, we'll start to learn in the next season that it's not your golden ticket to everything, but it's going to set her up quite nicely. I have 2 questions about this, and I'll start with my first one and then kind of end our discussion here with the last one. it's dark when this whole funeral thing happens. And it's not even dawn. It's full on daytime by the time Daenerys is like checked on. Like, did they wait a bunch of hours for that to happen?
They clearly went to sleep while she was burning and just got up and...
Do we just chill out here for a little bit? I mean, well, there's a nice fire, right?
Because
So
that
might as well sleep
entire wooden structure was ash,
here.
which would take a very long time to burn.
Like till the next morning, if not into the afternoon.
Yeah.
And she only looked up when they showed up as well, so maybe she also went to sleep?
Yeah, she was tired.
Okay, does anyone have anything else on Dany? Because I have a question I want to pose to you guys about it.
No.
So I got one quick question. So I get that she doesn't burn, and maybe this is a stupid question, but apparently that extends to her hair as well. Her hair doesn't burn.
Okay, so here is my question. That's a good thank you. It leads into it perfectly. So in the books, her hair does burn off.
Okay.
Also in the books, Daenerys is not fireproof. And George Martin has made a point to say this. Like, Daenerys, it's a product of the spell, of everything that's going on, of the mythos of the dragon, of the life that she's sacrificing, of this, all of these very lucky and coincidental things that are coming together. But beyond that and before that, Daenerys is not fireproof. And in the show, they set it up that she very much is. Like, we've already seen a couple instances of it, and we go on to see a couple more, like, ridiculous instances of it. And I wonder which ones you guys prefer.
I prefer the way it is in the show. It's pretty biased because I haven't read the book.
Right.
But I feel like her character just in general, being fireproof, to me, is more believable or more easily believable than if it just everything converged at once to allow this one episode of fireproofivity.
Sure.
Right? We love making up words on this show, so
We do it so well.
I think if I had to try, or even just trying to write that in the episode, that it was all just kind of a one-off, would be even more difficult than just flat out saying she's fireproof for me. Because it would be one of those, like, are you serious? Like, really? That seems weird that they would just be that one time that all the stars aligned and allowed her to have that capability. So I kind of like it the way it's in the show, but like I said, I have not read a book, period. So
I think the show does a good job, actually, of letting that play out. Obviously, I think when it comes to her hair color and everything from the book, the silver with the Targaryen, or not Targaryen, with what's their family?
You got it right.
It's Targaryen? Yeah, I don't know why I'm thinking that's confused. So with the whole silver thing, I mean, they're supposed to have violet eyes or purple eyes or something like that, right? In the book. I think they do a good job, and I think the show actually benefits from this starting now because that's such a cool symbol at the end. In the books, though, it has much more representation of her progress when she does get those things, and they don't even... You lose so much in the show, right? You have to explain so much more of the lore, and I don't think they have time to do those things. And I don't know how hot she would be with no hair. And that would be a hard thing for me to watch. I mean, if she was naked, no hair, I could do that, I think. But we all know she's going to put clothing on.
Sure. It's the one thing and it's kind of going into next season already, but talking into season 2, episode 1, they're in this very desolate, desperate position, and I think had they had her hair burn off, it would have kind of helped to sell it a little bit better. So I don't know that's a choice that they didn't stick with, but I guess if you're going to say that somebody's fireproof, you kind of have to extend that to everything.
Yeah. And it's a cool scene, though. I mean, it is a really neat scene. I still think that's... the holding the 3 dragons, I just remember the awkward way she's holding, like, the one dragon, like, in the pelvic region when she's standing up, and I'm like, yeah, that looks uncomfortable. Stop doing that.
Mm-hmm. She likes the warm scales.
It's a little dangerous there.
Doesn't break the show for me.
Well, it's, of course, the final episode of Season 1, which means that we will be starting Season 2 coming up on Monday, but we're also going to have something a little special for you tomorrow. And Hans, you want to maybe preview that a bit?
Yeah, we're going to do a little bonus season recap episode tomorrow. It's going to be just a little bit more relaxed episode. We're not necessarily setting an exact time frame. We're just going to kind of start chatting about the episode, start chatting about the season, give our thoughts on the whole season. If we get off track talking about other stuff, we're just going to let it ride, see what happens. We also have a guest. Our first guest on the show.
Oh, we've really made it, Mom.
I know. So we're going to have.
She's gonna fly out and make it.
Yeah,
It's a little busy right now.
We're going to have my friend Rob on the show, who also is a star of a very successful podcast called "And Rob's Your Uncle." So he's gonna stop by and chat about some Game of Thrones, chat about some other things. Maybe we'll talk about his podcast. Maybe we won't. I don't know.
Maybe we absolutely won't. And
But you know what we're going to talk about tomorrow? Scones. Lots of scones.
Yeah, as always. We try to run a 50-50 here on Thrones and Scones.
I almost don't want to go to it because I've seen your scone, Hans. It doesn't look great, but you've got a quote-unquote power scone today. Where is it from?
It is from a local coffee shop called Valentine Coffee.
Valentine. Okay.
And just to quickly review this thing, I do want to paraphrase a quote from Kanye West, which I introduced a bit, but in my opinion, no one man should have any of this power.
Of course, you can see it on our Instagram and understand why immediately. If you want to hit that up, it's Thrones and Scones. You can count how many times we've posted the wrong scone on the wrong day. I think we're up to twice already, and it's been 2 weeks. Yay, us. Facebook and Twitter are also Thrones and Scones, so whatever you want to hit us up. We're everywhere if you want to listen to us. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. You want to hit us up on Podbean at thronesandscones.com. That's got all the links for you. And we will catch you tomorrow for that little bonus action. Then, of course, next week for your usually scheduled program with Season 2, Episode 1. You down with GOT?
Yeah, you know me.
We didn't talk about Daenerys' boobs enough, though, right? I mean, I feel like we should go back and just cover those things one more time.
You want to cover them? That's exactly the opposite of what I thought you would be
cover them.
going for here.
I want to get to know them. We should all get to know them.
Okay. In all fairness, with the posting the wrong scones, we got to buy a lot of scones. Okay, it's
true. Oh yeah,
this ain't easy.
Once, just one time, we keep seeing Bran in this dream with the three-eyed raven, and it always sets up the same, and then something different happens. Just once, I want him to see, it opens up, he's stringing his bow, he looks, there's the raven, and I just want him to shoot it. I just want him to peg the bird right between its tri-eye.
I always was a good shot.
So I get that Bran has these abilities. Are we supposed to just know that Rickon also has some sort of thing going on, that he saw Ned too, or?
It's unclear. In the books, all the Starks have this connection with their wolves.
Okay.
Where they can kind of see through them. Bran to the nth degree, like he does in the books. And I think he's the only one that can ever control it, if I'm correct. Maybe Jon?
I think Jon, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
I don't remember, like, Rob, no.
But they don't allude to any of that in the books. So we get so little of Rickon that it's hard to know what they're going for.
And they make Rickon kind of a little creep in this one. It was just kind of creepy because he kind of comes in and then they talk to him a bit and then he just kind of floats away. He just kind of floats away into the darkness.
Slinks back in his nighty night, brother. I remember like vaguely Arya showing up with the Night's Watch and her being bullied by a guy. I don't remember it being that hot pie kid who by the time Arya leaves the group is like the whiniest little brat. And to see him here being like this big tough, like, oh, you little good-looking boy, like, I'll kick you in your balls to death. I've kicked a man in his balls to death before.
I can't believe we didn't bring that up. Like the fat kid, I kick you in the balls. That's how I commonly murder people.